Let's talk to Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante. He is the Director of Policy and Programs, I believe, at CDD. And CDD is also a key member of the CODIO. We have three issues: the registration of voters, the SML release, and then also the SNIT seal. Doc, thank you for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Did I get your designation right? You are the Director of Policy and Programs at...
I'm not... My designation has changed. Director of Policy Engagement and Partnerships.
Oh, wonderful. So that means that you are also in touch with the CODIO part of the CDD work.
Yes, I direct the elections program at CDD.
Wonderful. So let's start from there. The Commission has been registering new voters. They've done that for a few days. They decided to do it at their district offices. Some people did not agree. And people are asking for an extension of the period. They don't seem to be interested in that. What is the CODIO's overall assessment or interim assessment of how the process has gone so far?
Well, yeah, thank you very much. I think certainly there were serious challenges at the beginning, particularly to do with the activation codes, trying to do live transfer of the data, to check, double voting and double registration and other kinds of infractions. I think that was resolved midweek to go offline so that they can transfer the data, at the end of the exercise every day and then produce the daily records of registration. So that improved the registration process through the second week. But, typically with Ghana, there's always a rush at the beginning, then there's also a rush at the end. So we expect that there will be a rush at the end this week because the exercise would end on Monday. There are a number of factors that would inform the Electoral Commission to either extend or not to extend. So their projections were around 600, 650, based on, the expectation of people turning 18 and so on. I think based on the numbers that they have shared with the public, we are around 400,000 or so. So there's still maybe around 200,000 people based on the projections that probably are still not registered. And then they will be looking at the queues, the queues at the registration centers, the daily numbers and the queues after the end of day. Also, we've seen that in a number of places, generally the weather has been a little bit erratic. So we've seen some rainfall in a lot of places. And because the Commission, at least in terms of the compromise of expanding access, decided to reach out to hard to reach areas. I think almost about 700 centers, in addition to the district centers. Those areas are particularly going to be affected by the rain because a lot of those places are difficult to access, and once you get rainfall and so on, you're going to have some challenges there. So the numbers from those centers also would inform whether or not they are meeting their projections, or there's still a lot of people that still need to be registered. And I think those are some of the factors that have to be considered to decide whether or not you extend or if you don't extend.
So just a couple of points there. The EC themselves have said, and this was at least Sunday, May 19, that they did not think calls for extension were feasible at that time because they had registered some 522,000 people, of which 446,000 or 85% were first-time voters, aged between 18 and 21. This was as of the 13th day. Okay. Now, who sets these targets? Because they said that they are targeted registering 623,000 voters. Is this a target that we all know based on the voter population, or is this a target they set for themselves? Yeah. How do these things work?
Yeah, so normally they generate these figures working with the SASCA service in terms of population growth. from a particular segment of people. So remember that we did a full registration in 2020, and between 2021 and then the district level elections, we didn't have any registration. So remember the last time there was a registration for first-time voters, a limited one as well, which was done at the district level. That generated about 700,000 or so registrants. Most of them, about 80-something%, were first-time voters. And then this is the second one that we're doing. And the projections based on the self-care service was around it, I think 600 to 900 or something like that. So the commission projected, that they were going to register, about 600 or 650 people this time around. And every time they did the projection, that is seen as the optimum, like 100%. So if we are hitting 80%, they think that's good. But as I said, you always have to study the data that they are getting in terms of the numbers that are in queues at the end of the day, some of the factors that I've raised in terms of the start of the process and the challenges they had, and then some of the things like weather and so on that can impede people's access to the registration centers. And we also have to remember that during the whole 21 days of the exercise, people are turning 18 all the time. So then the projections are determined before the exercise. But in the course of the exercise, you also have people turning 18. So maybe, once you begin to factor those things in, they will get a sense this week whether, there's still large numbers of people who have not registered and need to be registered. And I think, at least for Codeo's monitoring, we also are looking at how many people are in the queue day after day to get a sense of, whether or not the size needs to be extended.
But on a preliminary basis, has the decision to do this at their district offices been vindicated? Because there was a lot of concern about that. People felt that in the past we used to do this at a more granular level, so that for each electoral district or for each constituency there will be more than one or two. But this appears to be basically one constituency, one registration center. So far, how have you guys assessed that?
Yeah, because, we in principle believe that, you need to give, it's the Commission's obligation, to facilitate people's rights, to vote, to register to vote. You have to really bring it close to them. So there are a lot of young, particularly for first-time voters, who generally economically don't have the means, to travel. A lot of them are also using the guarantor system. So the whole idea of going to mobilize somebody, two people to come and guarantee for you and travel from wherever you are to the registration center can be difficult. So I think for me, in principle, I prefer that it get closer to the people. This was part of the compromise of trying to now add centers that go to hard-to-reach areas. So I think that addition is useful. But the whole idea of moving to the district was really more to facilitate continuous registration, which the modalities which we still, have been discussing and was part of the CI that was sent to Parliament that was withdrawn. So I wouldn't say that necessarily we have sort of justifies that because it was not done for that purpose. The purpose is that once we go forward and we can agree on the modalities for continuous registration, then when you turn 18, you just go to the district office to go and register so that we don't have this limited. We can do more parts at the end. Okay. We don't have this process.
Last point on this. There were initial reports of fracas, in some cases fights at some of the centers. The EC, and I'm not sure if I'm quoting them correctly, but I think I heard them say in one of the press conferences that all those disagreements were occasioned by the guarantor system, and that places where people use the Ghana card, there was nothing like this. Have you seen enough of these disturbances to be worried about the overall peaceful nature of the process, or these are just a few and far between?
No, I mean, there has been violent cases, but I really I have to confess that I haven't looked at the data, from my office yet. But there has been some of them quite serious. But that has been a feature of registration. Our registration processes are more violent than even elections. It's always been the case. I think the only difference was the last 2020 elections where 8 people died. But registration has always been more violent than that. So, that's. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised that generally, I think we still manage to get through. The police have tried to deal with some of those ones and allow the processes, to go forward. There are particular areas that are hotspots, particularly in the Broa, Ahafo areas, and some of those places where there's always a confrontation and violence because of issues of indigents and strangers and all that stuff happening. So generally, I would say that we still manage it. There has been more violent, limited voter registrations in the past, but so far I think we are not out of the woods yet, because, as I say, in the last week there's always a lot of pressure. People try to rush to get to the end, and then that also generates some violence.
All right.
We have to be on the watch out.
Second question is on the President's decision to release the full SML report. I'm sure you know the background. 24th April, the President received a request from Media Foundation of West Africa under Section 18 of the RTI, asking for a copy of the KPMG report on the contracts and transaction between GRA and SML. The President initially refused to agree to the request, or denied the request, and said that the KPMG report constituted matters exempt under Section 5 of the RTI Act, quoting Section 5(1)(a) and (b). And basically, yesterday, somehow the President decides to release the report and then says it's in the interest of full transparency in governance, openness and honesty with the public. I mean, there are people who feel like the way they even construe Section 5(1)(a) and (b), it was initially even wrong to deny the request, because it was quite clear from other sections of the RTI Act that the President ought to have released the report. So does it matter that he's still saying, I was right in refusing, but based on transparency, I'm releasing it? Or should he have rather said, look, I made a mistake in my interpretation of Section 5(1)(a) and (b), and that based on other sections like Section 17, this ought to have been released immediately, and therefore accept my apologies? Should we care about that, or to the extent that the man has released the report, we should just consume the report and say thank you?
Oh, I mean, yesterday, I don't know if you are aware, but the Citizen Coalition also held a press conference, and one of the main demands was the release of the KPMG report in the morning. Now, don't know whether that contributed to the release of this report eventually, but there are a number of things that are important. The fact that the Media Foundation requested the information from the presidency itself is going to help improve the jurisprudence around the access to information from the presidency. So testing that particular process itself, for me, is an important exercise. And then the presidency's interpretation, because that also kind of determines the precedent that will be set around these things. And if it's reviewed by the RTI Commission, then we get a body of law as to how we access information from the presidency. So I'm happy that this process has happened and we got to this point. Of course, the interpretation issues, we can debate them as it is. But the other important point is that, and I agree with you that at least from my perspective, this was, the president decided to invite KPMG to look at this in the public interest. And once that decision was made, we expected that the report should be made public so that we can all scrutinize it and then we have to respond to it as well. So not really understand why, we had to do a summary and then, all of that stuff. But we are where we are now, and that I think is good. that kind of transparency is good. We can all study the report and ask for further actions. Because one of the things I picked up was that the clear violations of the law. So one has to ask, what is the legal status of this contract in the first place? Where a contract that actually has violated many laws is entered into by the GRA and with SML. And then payments have been made, right? And then it seems like there's a suggestion that, well, if I go and get PPA ratification later, it cures the mischief. That cannot be. I mean, for my legal understanding, that cannot be, because that contract in the first place was unauthorized. And to go and say that you are backdating something that was illegally acquired because now you are going to PPA, that should be cannot be retrospective. Even if it was the PPA board that wasn't completely constituted, that decided and said, okay, no, we'll wait till a football come and then we'll ratify later. That's a different matter. But when it is an illegal contract, and then you go back and say, no, go back and cover the illegality, but of course it's still illegal because there is no parliamentary approval and all of that. So what then should happen? Because there are public officers who took these decisions. What's supposed to happen to them? Because if we don't respect these laws and allow public money to be expended this way, we cannot just close our eyes, to these things. Then we are not really holding people accountable. And this is the reason why you are getting so many kind of infractions and so on in the system. So I think the full report, the release, even in terms of the value for money arrangement that SML and GRE is making, we still didn't get any information on what kind of investment SML has made to warrant what they say, a fee for performance arrangement. So I have many questions that I think needs to be followed up to allow this arrangement to go in whatever way that we are thinking about. So I think the release is important. It sets a good precedent in terms, even though we have to go to the RTI, but we should expect that there should be proactive disclosure from the presidency once it took the matter up and said it was in the public interest to do that.
Fair enough. The last point has to do with SSNIT and the sale of their 60% share in 4 hotels to Brian Champon's company. So that's I'm sure listeners know the background to this, right? So MP for Norton has petitioned Shraj to look into the sale because he's raising lack of due process, breaches in procurement procedures surrounding the sale. And then he's asking Shraj to halt the sale. Some are asking SSNIT to outrightly not even wait for the Shraj report, but to just halt the sale. Is the coalition of anti-corruption people concerned about this? And have you made any comments? What are your thoughts?
Yes, it was part of the issues that we raised at our press conference. I think so there are two facets to it. One is the decision of SSNIT itself to put these hotels up for sale. What is the public policy justification for it? What is it in terms of investment, returns and so on and so forth? What kinds of advice or analysis was presented to the SSNIT board to come to this point? Because there's some obvious questions, even from a layman's point of view. You have Labadi Beach Hotel, which everybody knows is well run, is profitable, is already making you money. Why are you prepared to divest 60% of it when you have 100% and you are making money out of it? Why do you want to do that? We need to understand that public policy justification, because you are using pension funds. We are all SSNIT contributors. So if you're going to use our, in a more prudent, credible way, we need to understand the rationale for all of those things. Then there is the issues of conflict of interest and making sure that the transaction itself is above board, because the individual that is involved and his company, what is the relationship between him and his company during this transaction? Because he happens to be a minister of state, because he happens to be a leading member of the ruling party, because he happens to be a member of parliament, In all of those scenarios, he has created a potential conflict of interest situation under Article 284 of the Constitution. Has he even divested his interest in his company? Has he put in a blind trust to separate him from his company during the transaction? Because he has, as being a member of government and being close to power, he has all of the advantages that even if he's competing with somebody, they don't have. How is that conflict of interest cured during the process of the transaction? That is where the information that the processes that SML went through to come to this decision has to be made very clear so that everybody understands that that conflict of interest was not still subsisting at the time of the transaction. That then gives him an unfair advantage. So those are some of the things. And of course, people can also assess the technical aspects of it, what the valuation and so on and so forth that goes in there. But those are fundamental issues that have to be, determined to say, oh, no, this is probably a good deal, and we have cleared ourselves or satisfied ourselves that there's nothing, untoward happening, and this is value for money in the public interest, and we should allow the process to go forward.
So in that sense, SRAJ is the right platform that Mr. Blackwell is using?
SRAJ will deal with one part of it. I'm still raising the issue about the decision itself and how they came about this decision, because I think that is a public policy matter. I think you hear from organized labor, that's one of the things that they want to understand. But there are also representatives of organized labor on the board. And I think it's quite interesting that this thing has gone on for so long and nobody, well, at least some of us do. I didn't know that, anything like this had been initiated. And what kind of reporting mechanisms they have to organize labor itself on the deal and the decision making. So I think if they can also share information to us, that would be helpful, to understand how the decision came about.
Final point, this is a bonus one. How concerned is the coalition, and this is not the voters, but the anti-corruption coalition, about moves to remove the special prosecutor? The process has been initiated by a petition by Mr. Amidu. The president has forwarded that to the CJ. CJ has written to Mr. Kissie Jabing to respond. I mean, again, some people have said this, the president has been selective because this is not the first time he's received a petition on a public officer. For some, he has chosen not to act. But on this one, he's acted and appears to have acted with dispatch. Again, within the same period, OSP is investigating Sisi Adapa's matter. He and Yoko have all this back and forth, which doesn't lead anywhere. He's released a work he's done with the controller on corruption and administrative whatever in relation to ghost names. Again, how does this appear to you? How should this matter be resolved?
Well, first of all, for me, it was an unwelcome distraction because the OSP itself has been, particularly since it took up the Citi other parties, it has gone through all kinds of challenges, to the point that I think following the spat between the OSP, Yoko, and the Attorney General, it was clear that government relations with the OSP is now strained. But we know that this was a specialized office that was set up to deal with politically exposed persons, some of the most powerful people in society when they are alleged to have engaged in criminality. And so we should expect that, the system can fight back in all kinds of ways. And that's why it was sad that now we have to get into this process of the petition. We have to recognize that Mr. Amidu's right, to petition just like any other citizen. And that the president, if he was following the Constitution consistently, has to forward these things when they come. So even in our press conference, we made it clear that now that he has shown this commitment, then we expect that all the backlog of cases that have been presented to him should also be forwarded, and then go into the future. That once he receives it, he forwards it, so that there is, consistency and credibility in the exercise of that obligation, because it's not a discretion; it's a mandatory obligation that he has to do that. Now, I mean, with the petition, I mean, the interesting thing is that all the issues that have been raised is something that has been canvassed publicly by Mr. Aminu. You know, from the time that these matters happened, whether it was when Mr. Kisi had his press conference, he made the point that he thought that it was abuse of the judiciary and so on and so forth. And people have clearly disagreed with him on these points. You know, so it sort of adds to the challenges of the OSP. Now he has to now focus on trying to respond to these matters. But we continue to, you know, encourage the OSP to just go about doing his job the best way he can. It is not an easy job to do, but we feel that it's important that we have institutions that are trying to make sure that everybody is equal before the law and that there are no, you know, sort of untouchables and all of that. So that's what gives government, you know, credibility and legitimacy. And the people are feeling despondent that, you know, when it comes to certain cases, it just gets frustrated, it becomes inconclusive, and we cannot get anywhere. If we don't have any predictability about these processes, it is going to make people continue to doubt and distrust the state. So we would watch keenly as the process is now before the Chief Justice to make a prima facie case. We'll watch it. But our message is that let's continue to support the actions of the OSP and because we need to protect that office because of what it represents in the scheme of in the area of institutions trying to fight corruption.
Thank you, Dr. Kojo Asante. We appreciate your time. He is the Director of Policy and Partnerships at the CDD 818. We dealt with 4 issues: the voter registration exercise, the calls for extension. He is also CDD is part of CODEO, so he spoke on in that capacity. And then the Coalition of Anti-Corruption Forces, I'm giving them that name. They held a press conference and dealt with a number of issues. They called for the release of a KPMG report. The president has released a report. They say the sale of 60% of shares in 4 hotels to Barney Champon, his company, is wrong, both on the conflict of interest basis and even the procedure they believe is not fair. So they dealt with that. And then the attempts to remove the OSP. So those are the 3 issues.